It was a quiet Saturday night in November 1987 when a young couple came home after enjoying a friend's wedding. Their house looked just like any other, calm, silent, nothing out of place. But when Monday came, no one had heard from them. They didn't show up to work, and calls went unanswered. Worried, their family went to check on them and walked into something they never could have imagined. What happened inside that home would remain a mystery for over 20 years, and the truth, when it finally came out, shocked everyone. Ryan Wingarden was born on December 12, 1962, into a large, tight-knit family rooted in tradition, faith, and structure. He was one of 8 siblings: Lynn, Terry, Bragg, Chia, David, Cheryl, and Gail, raised by Derosha and Wendell Wingarden. The couple built their home on strong values. Wendell, a World War II veteran, spent 26 years working at a furniture company and sang in the choir at Central Church in West Lyon for nearly 4 decades. The Wingardens were known for their wholesome family life and strong religious beliefs, the kind of family people in Holland, Michigan looked up to. But appearances can be deceiving. While the family's surface seemed idyllic, tensions quietly brewed. The youngest daughter, Gail, born on April 24, 1965, was especially close to her family. In the 1980s, she met Rick Lee Brink, a man 7 years her senior, born on February 12, 1958. Their relationship developed quickly and deeply. Friends remember Rick telling people the moment he met Gail that she was the one. In early 1986, they married, building a life filled with promise. The couple had good jobs, renovated their home together, and were seen by all as a shining example of young love. Meanwhile, Ryan's life took a very different turn. He struggled financially and scraped by selling small amounts of marijuana. He dated Pamela Ann, born on March 3, 1965, but maintained a secret relationship with an old flame, Crystal Billon. The contrast between Ryan's rocky path and Gail's stable, joyful life was stark. In the fall of 1987, a dispute ignited tensions within the Weingarten family. Derosha and Wendell, along with their younger children, planned to move onto Rick and Gail's property. While some siblings supported the move, others, including Ryan, strongly objected. The disagreement caused a rift, especially between Ryan and Gail, one that would have chilling consequences. On Saturday, November 21, 1987, Gail and Rick attended a wedding at a Holiday Inn. They returned home later that evening. No one heard from them again. 2 days later, on Monday, November 23rd, neither showed up for work. Concerned, Rick's parents went to their home. What they found would scar them forever. Rick's body was discovered slumped over the steering wheel of his Chevrolet Blazer in the garage. He had been shot twice in the head. His mother nearly collapsed at the sight. Rick's father guided her back to their vehicle before re-entering the house in search of Gail. Inside the main bedroom, he found her lifeless body sprawled on their waterbed. Her face was covered with a pillow soaked in blood. She had been shot 3 times. Police were called immediately. The crime scene revealed no signs of forced entry, no struggle, and no robbery. Jewelry remained untouched. Nearly $500 in cash was found between the bedroom and the kitchen. The murders had been clean, methodical, and cold. Autopsies confirmed the deaths occurred between the night of November 21st and the early morning of November 22nd. Investigators interviewed family, friends, and neighbors, but found no clear leads. There were no suspects, no motive, no arrests. The funeral was held shortly after. The officiating pastor referred to the crime as the work of the devil. The community was shaken, and media coverage lasted for weeks, but ultimately, the case grew cold. Over time, life resumed. Grief faded into silence. A year later, Ryan married Pamela. They had 3 children: Caleb, Elizabeth, and Benjamin. Derosha and Wendell's love story, despite the heartbreak of losing their daughter, endured. They celebrated their 50th anniversary before Wendell passed away on July 9, 2005. He was laid to rest with military honors at Rest Lawn Memorial Gardens, leaving behind a legacy of faith, family, and unanswered questions. But fate wasn't done with the case. In a twist no one expected, 24 years after the brutal killings of 1987, a lead emerged that would change everything. In 2009, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office formed a cold case team dedicated to reviving unsolved crimes. By 2011, a group of detectives were assigned to the Brink case. Their mission? Re-examine a case that had long been buried under dust and doubt. They began by combing through stacks of deteriorated documents, some so fragile they had to be pieced together with tape. Over time, they conducted more than 200 interviews, traveling across state lines to locate relocated witnesses. The team operated on a core belief: time erodes silence, guilt grows heavier, and eventually, someone talks. One of the earliest revelations came from Cheryl, Gail's sister. She recalled a bizarre comment Ryan once made. He wondered aloud if he could have been capable of doing something like what had happened to Rick and Gail. That chilling statement was echoed by one of the family's aunts. Curiously, Ryan had been interviewed back in 1987 but never considered a suspect. He claimed he had been with his girlfriend Pamela on the night of the murders. Initially, Pamela confirmed the story, but when detectives found a second statement from her that conflicted with the first, they summoned her for questioning on January 18, 2013. They placed Pamela in a small interview room at the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. After some hesitation, she began to speak, and her confession would finally shatter the silence. Pamela revealed what she had kept secret for more than 2 decades. Her husband, Ryan Wingarden, had murdered his sister and her husband. That November night, Ryan had gone to Gail and Rick's home, where yet another argument broke out over the family's planned move to their property. Gail and Rick asked him to leave. Ryan walked to his car, but returned moments later claiming it wouldn't start. Rick offered to help, and the two drove off together. That's when Ryan shot Rick twice in the head. After killing Rick, Ryan went back into the house. He found his sister alone in the bedroom and shot her 3 times as she lay on the bed. The horror didn't end there. The next day, Ryan brought Pamela and her 6-month-old baby to the crime scene. The woman was horrified when she saw Rick's body in the car. She froze, terrified. Ryan dragged her inside and forced her to look at Gail's lifeless body, removing the blood-soaked pillow from her face. Pamela fled in panic but didn't go to the police. Overcome with fear, she ran to the car and waited. Pamela told the detectives that Ryan had long resented his sister and brother-in-law. He was jealous of their happiness, their success, their stable life, everything he didn't have. Still, this motive was only part of the story. Pamela admitted she had stayed silent all those years out of fear of losing her job, her freedom, and her family. She loved Ryan and didn't want to break apart their home, but guilt had consumed her for over 2 decades. That day, with tears and trembling hands, she finally let it go. Her statement, combined with new testimony from other witnesses, gave detectives enough evidence to act. Later that same day, Ryan Wingarden was arrested and charged with the murders of Gail and Rick Brink. Prosecutors now faced the enormous task of proving, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Ryan had murdered his own sister and brother-in-law in cold blood. The case was sent to court in Holland, Michigan, where a family's long nightmare would finally confront the light of justice. In February 2013, nearly 26 years after the brutal murders of Gail and Rick Brink, probable cause hearings began in a courtroom in Holland, Michigan. Over the course of several days, more than 50 witnesses were called to testify. Prosecutors acknowledged the monumental work done by detectives who had tirelessly reopened a long-dormant case and painstakingly assembled a narrative from decades-old fragments. As the witnesses took the stand, gaps in memory became apparent. The passage of time had blurred details, dates, conversations, even basic facts. The defense seized on these inconsistencies to undermine the prosecution's case, casting doubt on the reliability of the testimonies. Assistant Prosecutor Lee Fisher admitted the challenges of building a case on aged recollections. Still, he remained hopeful. Not all testimonies had been heard yet, and among the most anticipated was that of Crystal. Crystal, who had dated Ryan Weingarten for 4 years before the murders and maintained an ambiguous relationship with him afterward, delivered her statement with calm precision. She spoke clearly and confidently, but only after Ryan had been removed from the courtroom due to disruptive outbursts that interfered with proceedings. Her testimony would unveil the darkest secret of all. Crystal recounted a disturbing conversation with Ryan shortly after the 1987 murders. They met at a park in northern Holland, where Ryan, emotional and distressed, confessed something horrific. During their teenage years, he had sexually assaulted his sister Gail on multiple occasions. Gail had resisted, said no, but Ryan had ignored her pleas. What's more, Ryan claimed that Rick had once seen him watching Gail with a look of inappropriate desire during a family boating trip. The shame, rage, and fear of being exposed had, according to Crystal, driven Ryan to silence both Gail and Rick permanently. This revelation gave prosecutors a powerful motive, one far more sinister than jealousy alone. Ryan wasn't just envious of their happiness. He was terrified that his long-hidden crimes against his sister would be exposed. Murder, to him, became the only way to protect that secret. Crystal's statement was consistent with earlier testimony from Pamela, Ryan's wife, who had already described his resentment toward Gail and Rick's success. Pamela once again recounted the harrowing moment when Ryan forced her to view the crime scene. Cheryl, another of Gail's sisters, testified that Ryan had behaved oddly after the murders, distant and emotionless. In one call, he coldly remarked that Gail had lived a good life, as if trying to diminish the tragedy. Most disturbingly, he told Cheryl he sometimes wondered if he might have been capable of such an act. During courtroom recesses, debates swirled over the reliability of witness statements. The defense attorney argued that some claims sounded more like gossip than evidence. Still, the prosecution stood firm, grounding its case in the testimony of Crystal, Pamela, and Cheryl, each independently supporting the theory that Ryan's motive stemmed from jealousy and the fear of exposure over an incestuous, abusive past. Ultimately, the judge ruled that the evidence presented was sufficient to move the case to trial in the Ottawa County Circuit Court. It was a decisive moment. Justice, long delayed, was finally inching forward. In response, the defense attorney announced plans to pursue alternate theories. He hinted that the crime may have been a case of mistaken identity, suggesting that the Brinks had recently moved into the home and the intended target could have been someone else. It was a theory the prosecution rejected entirely. While these legal maneuvers played out, Ryan Wingarden, then 50 years old, remained behind bars in the Ottawa County Jail, held without bond. But no matter how long it had taken, the truth had begun to surface. And now, there was no turning back. In March 2014, after more than a year of legal proceedings and decades of buried secrets, the long-awaited trial of Ryan Wingarden began. Over the course of 3 intense weeks, more than 60 witnesses testified, including 2 of his sisters, his ex-girlfriend Crystal, and his wife Pamela. Their testimonies were instrumental in establishing both Ryan's motive and his guilt. Among the most pivotal witnesses was James, a childhood friend who later became Ryan's boss at a tree-trimming service. Despite firing him at one point, the two remained close. James recalled a conversation from November 24, 1987, just one day after the bodies of Rick and Gail Brink were discovered. Ryan, speaking in riddles, made disturbing allusions to the crime, suggesting knowledge only the killer could have had. Another key testimony came from Ryan's sister Lynn, who remembered her brother expressing regret after the murders, saying he wanted to apologize to Gail because he felt he had dishonored her. This vague yet unsettling statement took on new meaning in light of what would emerge later in the trial. The defense attorneys insisted Ryan had an alibi and questioned the prosecution's lack of direct physical evidence. They floated alternate theories. Perhaps the Brinks had been targeted by a drug gang from Detroit, or maybe they were caught in a case of mistaken identity involving the home's previous owners. They even raised questions about whether different weapons could have been used, but forensic pathologist Dr. Stephen Cole dismissed that notion, confirming both victims were killed with a single firearm. Dr. Cole also suggested Rick's body may have been repositioned. His blood-soaked head had clearly rested on the steering wheel, but his body was later found in the passenger seat. To clarify the trajectory of the bullets, the doctor used anatomical models and rods to demonstrate the injuries in court. Pamela was brought back to the stand. She reaffirmed that Ryan had confessed to killing his sister and brother-in-law out of jealousy and fear. The prosecution built its case around the testimonies of Pamela, Crystal, Cheryl, and Lynn. They argued that Ryan was driven by rage and desperation, not just over a family dispute, but over the looming threat that Gail might reveal the dark secret he had kept for decades. The following week, Ryan himself took the stand. Pamela chose not to remain in the courtroom during his testimony. Ryan was combative, accusing police and prosecutors of twisting his words. But then, under oath, he made a shocking admission. He had engaged in 3 sexual encounters with his sister, beginning when he was 12 and she was just 9. He claimed they were consensual, an assertion met with disgust by prosecutors who labeled it as nothing short of abuse. On March 28, 2014, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. They returned a unanimous verdict, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Ryan Wingarden was found responsible for the cold-blooded killings of his sister Gail and her husband Rick Brink. A sentencing hearing was scheduled for April 21, 2014. That day, Ryan arrived in court defiant and unrepentant. For an hour, he proclaimed his innocence, lashed out at prosecutors, criticized his own defense attorneys, and even insulted the judge. He declared he would be vindicated by God. The judge was unmoved. He called Ryan a calculated, manipulative killer who had slaughtered 2 people in cold blood, one of them his own sister. He sentenced Ryan Wingarden to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The courtroom filled with emotion. Family members of both victims wept, hugged, and thanked the investigative team for their relentless pursuit of the truth. Cheryl, through tears, said she could finally visit her sister's grave and tell her that justice had been served. One of the detectives later described the case as one of the most emotional of her career. She said they had done everything in their power to ensure that two lives, stolen so unfairly, were honored through justice. In 2018, Ryan Wingarden appealed his convictions to the Michigan Court of Appeals. His request was denied. He later appealed to the state's Supreme Court, but that too was rejected. Since his arrest in January 2013, Ryan has remained in prison. Now in his 60s, he is expected to die behind bars. Ryan's father, Wendell, passed away without ever knowing the full truth, but his mother, Dorosia, lived to see justice served. She turned 90 in June 2021 and died 4 months later, having witnessed the resolution of the case that haunted her family for more than a quarter century. The Ryan Weingarten case stands as a dark and sobering reminder. Some secrets destroy not just lives, but entire families. Instead of confronting his past with honesty, Ryan chose a path of silence, shame, and ultimately, violence. And for that, he will spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, a consequence born of truth long denied. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.